Hey everybody, Josh Neighbors here. This is the College Countdown here on the Rogue Media Networks. Glad to have you all alongside us here on a Monday, January 13th, 2025. We are 1 week away from the national championship game in college football, which is exciting and also sad for many reasons. On today's show, we'll talk about how Ohio State got there. Who is to blame on Texas? Is it Quinn Ewers or is it Sark? Is it even blame? What do you guys think? We'll break that down and more. Also, some thoughts on Notre Dame getting past Penn State, even though it was a little while ago. And then also, we'll take a look at some portal news. Carson Beck going to Miami. Do we think that's a good fit? Do we think it's going to work? And a whole lot more. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave your comments, leave your questions as well. We really appreciate when you guys do that, especially as sub to the channel. It helps us a lot. You can find us on Twitter. I'm at Josh Neighbors _. Also, you can find us at CC Podcast JN as well. And I think that takes care of all of our admin. Also have some coaching search stuff, as you know, NFL teams are going to interview some college coaches. We'll see what else happens as well on that front. But we have to get to those games the other night. So our national championship game is set. Notre Dame is going to play Ohio State. Both games are very competitive. I would say that the Penn State Notre Dame game, I don't feel like the right team won. You could say the better executing team, the N won, sure, but I felt like Penn State was just better. Guy falls over, long touchdown for Greathouse, and also that terrible Drew Aller pick. They beat a different spot. The Ohio State game, the right team won, right? I think Ohio State was probably about 7 points better than Texas, in my opinion. It ends up being a 14-point game. The late pick, kind of seals that. Jack Sawyer, obviously, his fumble 6 that he returned for a touchdown makes a 2-score game, but Texas driving about to go in. But also, it felt like Ohio State was the better team. And here's the thing about Ohio State before we get to the Texas side of it. I was saying at the beginning of the year, I did some stuff for Bleacher Report where it was, hey, who do you think the best teams in the country are? Playoff predictions now. And Ohio State, it's just hard to bet against that roster, especially in a 12-team playoff, because what happens is it does not make the regular season less important, but they had the ability to lose games and still be there in the end, right? They beat, a couple early season wins. They beat Penn State, which is a big win for them, obviously, right? And so they're able to kind of work on things, get better as they went along. Then the late season thing against Michigan, I think, was a really kind of a moment of clairvoyance for Ryan Day. I mean, you see yourself getting in your own way. Oregon beats you straight up, sure. But you got in your own way and cost your team a chance at winning the big game, obviously, going to a conference championship, getting a top 4 bye, all of that stuff. And you could argue, hey, the running start in the playoff maybe helped out Ohio State. But I would tell you at this point in time, they're not national champions just yet. And they have been significantly injured, and they've had to play extra games that they didn't want to actually have to play. So I know they didn't play a conference championship game, but still. And they had to go back at that point, and play all these games in a row, right? So I think Ohio State having that moment really was important for them. And then in a normal 12-team playoff situation, I think Notre Dame had a case, or a 14 playoff rather. Notre Dame had a case to get in, but they wouldn't have because their NIU loss. Right. But they were a hammer ever since then. And so it's been cool to watch them work through injuries. Riley Leonard's not a great thrower. They've had to work through that. It's been fun to see. But that Ohio State team, you knew was such a good roster, and you got to actually watch them work through that. Right. I think the cool part about 12-team playoff is you can see the difference in this Notre Dame team than other Notre Dame teams. Also, the cool thing about it is you can see how good this Ohio State team is, and you can see them hitting their gear, hitting their stride. It kind of reminds me last year of the Chiefs in their playoff run, right? The Kansas City Chiefs are playing last year, and let's see, I think they were playing in wild card weekend. 2024 playoffs, right? I think they were playing a wild card weekend, so they had to run the table in a different kind of way, right? They had the Dolphins at home, and then they had to go and beat the Bills. They had to go and beat the Ravens on the road, then had to go and beat the Chiefs. And not saying, once again, Notre Dame, they'd have to go on the road. Obviously, they had the first game at home, but they were able to really flex their muscles and show how good they were up front. And it was cool to see them win games the way they did. It was never always pretty, but it was cool to see them just grind out a Georgia. They beat Indiana to a pulp in that game. And to see them hang on, rebound, and respond against a really good, a Penn State team was very, very impressive. And so I really enjoyed watching that. And then honestly, like, I know Ohio State's games have not been super competitive since the playoffs started, but there is something fun and exciting about watching a team that is that good play that well, right? We know how good Ohio State is as a team, or can be as a team. It was awesome to watch them flex and show that and show how good they could be and do that consistently, because that's the thing. It wasn't just one game. They did it game after game after game, and that was exciting to see a team use all parts of the team to be as good as Ohio State was. And to watch Will Howard step up and really hit that next level, to watch Jack Sawyer make that big play against Quinn Ewers, that was all really impressive. And so it's fun to watch them peak. And yes, they should be the favorite, but I know this is a more NFL style, but Ohio State in this 12-team playoff era is able to flex that muscle. They were not able to do it before. And I think it's good that the best teams are getting in. We're not arguing about like Ohio State getting in or Ole Miss getting in, right? Those teams didn't deserve it. Or excuse me, about Alabama getting in or Ole Miss getting in or South Carolina. Like, those teams didn't deserve it because of some of the things that happened on the resume. Whether it was Ole Miss's loss to Florida or Kentucky or Alabama's losses to Vanderbilt and Oklahoma, those teams didn't deserve it. Ohio State, in my opinion, did deserve it because of the way that their losses looked and the number of losses and everything like that. And they had to work their way there, and that was good. On the Texas side of things, they always say that the better story is in the losing locker room, because now you have a situation with Texas where they keep getting closer, and they're getting closer, right? So last year they go to the playoff, they win the Big 12 championship, they go to the CFP, they lose to Washington in the first game, and a really close, fun, exciting game. Okay, then the second one now, right? So they beat Clemson, which they should have. They beat Arizona State in a thriller, which they should have beaten Arizona State, but they end up winning in a thriller and showing some moxie and some poise. And then this game looked like it could have gone sideways early, but I thought Texas is just too tough. They're too well coached. Quinn Ewers stepped up. They scored on the same play twice, that wheel route to that left side. They scored on, I think it was wheel route twice. I think it was Jaden Blue they found in the end zone. And so, they were able to fight back and adjust, and they really caused Ohio State's offense a lot of not just stress, but just a lack of success in the second half because of how physical they were, and they were getting after it. They really did a good job, I thought, Texas defense. And of course, obviously, they bracketed Jeremiah Smith. And look, Carnell Tate's really good. Emeka Ibuka's really good. But despite that, like, Jeremiah Smith is such an unbelievable level above those guys. And I don't mean to demean those guys, but like, they're not even like the next level down. I think they're good wide receivers. They're good complementary guys. They'll be NFL players, right? Carnell Tate had a really nice game. Ibuka had a decent game as well. But, they were using Quinshawn Judkins and Travion Henderson. Obviously, Henderson has a long touchdown. But you take out that play, it was tough sledding. It was really tough sledding in this game. They only rushed for 3.4 yards per carry. The longest run was 22 yards. That's kind of what you expect when you play Texas with how good their defensive front is. They had 4 tackles for loss. They got after it, but so did Ohio State's defense, and that was the big difference. And I think there's equal blame to go around. I didn't think Quinn Ewers played terribly. He did miss some throws, but he made those to the end zone that he needed to make. And I think you can equally blame Sark for the play calling there, the stretch play. I know I've seen it work before. I understand it, but man, I like to put guys under center and push forward. And I think that's a spot where Arch Manning needs to come in, and you got to push him forward and push him in. And maybe you're worried about him fumbling, right? He had the carry earlier in the game where he fumbled. And I think that might have put, didn't fumble technically, but like lost the ball there at the end. I think that did put some concern in the mind of one Steve Sarkisian. I think that caused him to be like, well, am I sure I want to put a guy like an Arch Manning in this spot, in this situation, later on down the line. I get that. I understand that. But I don't like shotgun plays where you're putting guys further away from where they need to go. If you need to get 1 yard, don't back up 4 or 5 yards and run to the left. pound it in there, get close, do what you need to do, push. I mean, the tush pushes around. It works. The naval nudge in college worked a bunch. A lot of these teams are running these variations of, of the kind of that play that the Eagles run, the Bills run it, right? I think that is something that's pretty obvious, that the Eagles run it as well. And, Navy ran it. I think there's ways that in college it can be run too and run effectively. Alabama should have a version of that should be unstoppable with Jalen Milroe, or should have had a version that was unstoppable with a Jalen Milroe. So I think there's ways to do that. And I think that was a massive mistake. But, they got pretty close. And I think that's the hard part now is for Texas, you need to get another. I mean, I think you got to put yourself again close to a championship, and you want to get that first round bye, but they need to really improve at wide receiver. And man, I forgot the kid's name, right tackle, who got just absolutely whipped in that final play. Like, they got to be a little bit better there. And I think the one thing about Arch is that he's going to bring a mobility. I just don't know if he's as accurate as Quinn Ewers is. And the thing about this was you needed to be accurate this year for Texas's offense because their wide receivers were not as good at getting separation. Golden did a really good job, but he's not like wide open. He's kind of barely open. Ryan Wingo, I think, will be really, really good. Isaiah Bond's got that speed, but as I've talked about a bunch, they don't have the diversity in targets this year that they did last year. And I know they found Jaden Blue in the end zone too, but these weren't guys who were physical, the kind of the complete package wide receiver. They don't have those guys. They don't have they don't even have Emeka Ibuka would be their number one. You could argue even Carnell Tate might be their number one, right? That's kind of the situation at wide receiver for Texas right now. They've got a lot of good guys, but not a lot of great guys. I mean, Jordan Whittington was their third or fourth best receiver last year, right? Outside of A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy and J.T. Sanders and Gunnar Helm and Jonathan Brooks. They had all those weapons last year. They did not have that this year. And so that put a lot more stress on Quinn Ewers, and I thought he played about as well as he could when, the offensive line was up and down. Should have been pretty good. Kelvin Banks will be a first rounder, obviously. But I think there's places they can improve there. I think the defense is pretty damn good. I mean, if they're going to keep getting guys in the interior like they have, they've got really special players in the outside, good pass rushers. They got cooked a bit there early on, but that's just kind of they had to bracket Jeremiah Smith and then play man everywhere else. So I think that was probably just that was one of those cost of doing business type situations. And I think because of that, that was what they were willing to give up, and they got beat early in the game. They did not get beat a lot late. And obviously had the big snafu with with Travion Henderson, was able to break free. But for the most part, I liked a lot what I saw from Texas on defensive side. On offense, there's just a couple more things that they can round out. They can round out this roster. They can get better. But you look at the portal and you look at what these top teams, your Ohio States, your Penn States, your Georgias, your Notre Dames, your Texases, those teams are predominantly built off of the guys they recruited, and the portal guys finish off their roster. They complement their roster. You do not build your roster off of those guys in the portal. And so I think Texas recruiting wise has done a great job. Steve Sarkisian's done a great job. They're going to be right back here, but will Arch Manning be, how long will it take, or will it even happen for him to be a guy that is a developed passer and runner? I mean, if he's 6'4" and he's like Justin Fields, whatever, they're going to be great. You don't have to worry about it, but can he even be as good of a thrower as Justin Fields? And Justin Fields is not some elite thrower. So we'll see on that front. More on the national championship here. Let's get to a little bit of Carson Beck, right? Do you think Carson Beck will work at Miami? So I think this is an interesting move because they're losing a lot, and obviously lose Cam Ward, and you bring in a Carson Beck type guy. Is Miami going to be able, a couple things, like for this to work, Miami's going to have to improve on defense. And this is not even just about, hey, in the playoff and whatnot. Like the ACC, I mean, they had a couple close losses because they got shut down for a bit, and their defense held in some of those games. But man, most of the year they're getting dog walked. And Miami will be favored in a majority of their games next season when you look at who they've got. They're going to have a really good chance at going 11-1, at going 10-2. They play Notre Dame next year, but that's not a conference game. They avoid Clemson. They play Florida State next year as well. So as they always do. But is there anybody else on the ACC agenda, on the roster, and on the schedule for them that you're really worried about? I don't really know if there is. And you see that Miami 2025 football schedule, not seeing a ton there that warrants being worried about in conference. Yes, you have Notre Dame to open up the year. And the first 4 games actually are all at home. You don't leave the state of Florida until well, they don't have the schedule set here. But, I mean, yeah, on the road, you've got SMU. Could be a tough game. At Pitt, could be a tough game. Virginia Tech, that was a tough game this year, but I think they're a better team. They've got Syracuse at home. They've got Stanford at home. They've got NC State at home. They've got Louisville at home. They've got FSU on the road. And they've got Florida, USF, Bethune-Cookman, and Notre Dame. So it's like they're playing a bunch of bad teams. Florida, tough game. But in ACC play, you're not overly concerned about what they're facing off against. And that's what matters to get yourself a chance in the ACC championship and then ultimately get yourself a chance to get a bye and into the college football playoff. That's what really matters. The big thing is their defense going to be a lot better. Can they retool the personnel to make the defense better? And also, who are going to be their weapons next year? They're going to have to get these guys. I mean, at wide receiver, they were like incredibly old, right? Xavier Restrepo, I believe, I think he's out of eligibility. I'm not totally positive. But they were pretty old at wide receiver. They should be able to import some guys in, but are they going to be able to keep refining that offense? Up front, they were pretty good last year. To me, Carson Beck, the big key is like, are you just going there because your girlfriend goes there and you need to change the scenery? Is it a combination of things? Is it going to make you happier to be there? Is this really what's the best thing for you? I think there's a chance Carson Beck could have gone to the NFL and still gotten drafted pretty high because of how weak the draft class is and how desperate teams typically are for quarterback. I mean, if you think about the NFL right now, and you think about like the teams, you just look across the league. Let's see, like Miami might need a quarterback. The Jets need a quarterback. Patriots have theirs. Pittsburgh's going to need a quarterback. It looks like the Browns eventually will. I mean, they're not doing well with what they've got there. The Colts might be turning the page at quarterback. See how long Trevor Lawrence has. The Titans need a quarterback. The Raiders need a quarterback. The Giants need a quarterback. The Cowboys might need a quarterback. We'll see there. The NFC North teams, we'll see what happens in that one. They're going to keep one of those two guys. The Saints need a quarterback. The Rams will need one here pretty soon, right? The Seahawks will need one pretty soon. 49ers might need one pretty soon. The Cardinals might need one pretty soon. I mean, there were places and situations for Carson Beck to be. He's going to have to play really well next year, in my opinion, for him to end up getting where he wants to be in terms of NFL draft grade. He's going to have to play really good football next year. And I don't know if he's got that quality of football in him to get to that level. We'll see. A little bit easier competition. We see guys go other places outside the Southeastern Conference and thrive. But I've got questions about Carson Beck upstairs. He had a couple 3-pick games this year, right? Luckily for him, they won those 3-pick games. But man, it was not always a pretty picture for Carson Beck. And look, part of that was team construction. Georgia was not especially good at wide receiver. And they were, especially compared to 2023 Georgia, they weren't that good at wide receiver. So I think Miami's a good spot because they're so good. I don't know how good Carson Beck is going to be. Like this year, when you watched Cam Ward, he was legit good. There was not like ACC good. He was just good. He was great. Can Carson Beck ride the coattails maybe of the ACC being down to look better? But here's the thing. Bo Nix went to the Pac-12 and things got better for him. And look at him now. And they lost yesterday, but still, Bo Nix, playoff quarterback, all that stuff. So there's a potential that this does work in that way, or it could elevate him because he's playing at a lower level. We'll see. But hopefully he's, life happy, and hopefully Carson Beck can be football happy as well. All right, that will do it for today's show. Make sure you follow us on Twitter at @JoshNeighbors_. I'm at, NWPod365. At CC Podcast JN. Like the video, sub the channel, like everything else. Appreciate you all following us. We'll talk at you all mañana.
We are Rogue Media Sports.